Hi, welcome to our series, The Ism and the Artist. This week or this month, we're going to take a look at ukiyo-e art from Japan and the artist Hokusai. But today we'll just be looking at the art in general. So again, I'm Julia Pfister, and let's get started. So ukiyo-e is a genre of Japanese art which flourished from the 17th through the 19th centuries. Its artists produce woodblock prints and paintings of such subjects as female beauties, kabuki actors, sumo wrestlers, scenes from history and folk tales, landscapes, flora, fauna, and also erotica. The term ukiyo-e translates as pictures of the floating world. Now, Edo, modern Tokyo, became the seat of the Tokugawa shogunate in the early 17th century. The merchant class at the bottom of the social order benefited the most from the city's rapid economic growth. They began to indulge in the entertainments of the social world because they had more money to spend. And this really included the printed or painted ukiyo-e works that emerged in the 17th century. They were very popular with the merchant class, who would become wealthy enough to not only afford them, but also to decorate their homes. So ukiyo-e gradually began to have the meaning of current modern style. So they were really painting things that were happening in the world around them. You know, scenes from real life as opposed to scenes from mythology or history or things like that. So it would be, again, the theaters, um, of women, of course, because with all the erotica stuff, which we will not be going into here, and also about society and social life in general. Professional artists who were known for usually only drawing for wealthy people in the old days, such as the court nobles and the samurai, began to draw the social life of the early modern era. And this really captured the life of the daily life of the common people. And it eventually resulted in this ukiyo-e art style. So it's kind of neat that we also kind of get this look at what was happening in Japan at the time. Even though it's so exotic to us, this would have been things very familiar to them. So before we go and take a look at all the ukiyo-e art, I thought we'd talk more a little bit about the nuts and bolts of it. First, how large was the average art? And the average size was usually like a playbill, which was about 10 inches by 15 inches. The cost, a single sheet print was at usually about a fixed price of about 16 mon, which would have been roughly about $3 or $4 today. And or the serving of the price of noodles. So Edo's immense population eagerly consumed these prints, displaying them on a shoji screen in the home, only to they tear down outdated designs to put new ones up. So these were fleeting. It wasn't like an oil painting or something like that, or that long lasting. So many prints passed through Edo as ephemera. There was a collector base, even in the 18th century. Deluxe printings and sorimono, privately commissioned works, were more expensive and exclusive, and often only printed in single editions of 10 to 200. There were also some serial formats, such as the 53 stations of the Tokaido and the 36 views of Mount Fuji. And this encouraged the Edoites to get the entire series there. But the longevity kind of, again, depended on the person here. It's almost kind of like collecting baseball cards and how many people actually keep them in the sleeve and keep them pristine and things like that. So it's just things moved over the years. Now there's also a question, because these were all woodblock prints, mainly that we're going to look at today, and how many prints were produced. But all we really have are estimates. The Asian Art Museum in San Francisco quotes about 200 prints as the usual edition size, with subsequent editions also being printed in 200 print runs. The museum asserts that 8,000 prints could be pulled per block before it needed to be recarved. In the Wall Street Journal's review of the Museum of Fine Arts exhibition of Hokusai, the journalist concluded that roughly 100 impressions of Hokusai's Great Wave exists today, while suggesting, though, an original run of around 5,000 prints. So you could get a lot from it. So it was really not, again, not this highbrow art, but again, art for the masses. So I thought we would take a look at how woodblock is created, so you kind of know what is going on here with it. So ukiyo prints was really the fruits of a collaboration among a hanmoto, or a publisher, the eshi, the artist who draws the design, a harishi, an artist who carves the printing block, and a surishi, the artist who adds colors to the prints by printing the block and the prints. So the artists who draw the designs tend to take center stage, but the publisher's planning ability, the techniques of the carver and the printer made a remarkable difference in sales. Since ukiyo-e were made to be sold for profit in the first place, in most cases, the hanmoto had the authority to decide on the artwork theme, which eshi, harishi, and surishi to hire, and what carving and printing and techniques to use. So thus it can be said that ukiyo-e is not a pure work of art created by one artist, but as an art created as a product or craft. Now, for carving, just for the carving alone, a complete set of average blocks could be carved in as little as 3 days, and even complex sets took a couple of weeks. Detailed areas would be done by a master carver, and then there would be the rest would be left to a trainee or a body carver. So we'll take a quick look at the process, just so we understand what's going on here. So after receiving a quest from the hanmoto, the eshi, or painter, draws a sketch using only a black ink to create the final sketch. Based on this final sketch, the harishi carves a monochrome version on the wood block. And once the key print is printed, the eshi carries out the color instructions and attends the printing process that follows. The complete picture of nishiki-e, such as the overall color concept and detailed carving instructions, really existed only in the mind of the eshi. So there was a lot of creativity in this as well. Now, the harishi, or sculptor, would carve the omahan, or wood, based on the hanshita-e and each wood block for printing each color. And this would be according to the color instructions of the eshi. Now, in ukiyo-e carving, carving a face and hair required the most sophisticated skills, but could be drawn by an eshi, which was, again, would just have been the rough sketch to do that, done in simple lines. So detailed carving, such as carving every single piece of hair, was solely dependent on the aesthetic sense and capability of the harishi. So each artisan in this really did put their own artistic skill into it. And so here also, we see the artist here using this vermilion ink. The eshi designates colors for individual key print sheets, and they were printed then from the complete omahan. And in such a way, the hanshita-e is used when making the omahan. The kiyogazuri created by the eshi is mounted on the woodblock, which served as a guide when the irohan is carved. So now the surishi, or printer, prints the carved woodblock on the paper to complete the ukiyo-e. Calculating the overall balance of the print and fine adjustments of the woodblock. You also had to make sure that the register was in the same place. So they had certain marks for when that was done. When they were printing it, the lightest color with the smallest area was printed first, with the order then changing to darker colors and larger areas to really achieve this full aesthetic finish. So quite a process to go through just for all these prints. But then again, once you printed it, you could get a lot of them off of it, but just a lot involved in there. So this is really one of the first examples of ukiyo work, but this is actually a painting. This is painted on a screen, which the shoji screen, in 6 folds, and is painted on gold leaf paper. It depicts people in the pleasure quarters of Kyoto playing music and games. And this was really thought to be the first example of ukiyo art, but is not a woodblock print. But again, it's certainly showing the genre that we know ukiyo-e to be. Now, in the early Edo period, ukiyo-e started as one-piece black ink only woodblock prints. that separated from illustration inserts in printed books. The drawings were circulated in towns and spread among the common people for their enjoyment. Eventually, people became dissatisfied with the simple black only and demanded much more colorful designs. As a result, a few techniques to add colors to the black prints were invented to meet the demand, but these could not be used for that mass production, as these prints like that would have been hand colored. So again, they keep moving the art along as they have in every country in the world through the centuries. Now, color prints began in the mid-Edo period. And again, alignment marks were placed on the printing blocks so that the colors would not get out of position during the color print process. And this made it possible for this mass production of the prints. There was elaborate multicolor prints were made by layering impressions from more than 10 color printing blocks also came into being. These were called Azuma Nishiki-e, because they became so beautiful and almost as beautiful as the beautiful silks that they also had. This artist Moronobu was really the first great master of ukiyo-e. And again, this was the genre that depicted entertainment districts and other scenes of urban life. Moronobu was born in the present-day Chiba prefecture and then moved to Edo, which is now present-day Tokyo, when he was young. And this is where he learned the techniques of painters patronized by the Tokugawa shogunate and the imperial court. When he first became an independent artist, his work mainly consisted of drawing illustrations for books, printed using woodblock print in black ink only, and were often unsigned. He gradually emerged as a fine artist and diligently worked in the areas of one-piece black ink only woodblock prints done by hand, again, which resulted in laying the foundation for future ukiyo-e development. In 1617, oops, am I missing this? There we go. Sorry about that. In 1617, Tanyu was appointed by the Tokugawa shogunate to become the shogunate's first official painter. Over the following years, he was given many highly prestigious commissions, and he also created many large numbers of large-scale works for the Edo Castle, the Osaka Castle, Nagoya Castle, etc. So we're kind of now into the full development of ukiyo art. So we'll take a look at some of the main artists from that area from this time. Masunobu was a print designer, a book publisher, and a painter. He also illustrated novelettes and in his early years wrote some fiction. At first, his work adhered to the Tori school, but later drifted beyond that. Again, he is a figure in the formative era of the ukiyo-e, doing early works on actors and bijinga, sorry for my pronunciations here, which was also pictures of beautiful women. And so what we see here would have been a theater scene. Now, Harunobu was really an innovator, and he was the first to produce full color prints in 1765, rendering obsolete the former modes of 2 and 3 color prints. Harunobu used many special techniques and depicted a wide variety of subjects, from classical poems to contemporary beauty. So a lot of we see the 2 lovers in the brill. I just thought this was so beautiful, though it's not one of the big full color prints. This is a depiction of Onji Otani, who was an actor in the kabuki. He is here portrayed as Edobi in a May 1794 production of Kyoi Nyobo Samawaki at a theater in Edo or Tokyo. And again, this is a polychrome woodcut print. And again, this kind of would have been used as an advertisement or a show bill. This is another of Utamaro's. We saw one earlier. He is really one of the most highly regarded designers of ukiyo-e woodblock prints and painting, and is best known for his large-headed pictures of beautiful women. And we certainly see one here with the beautiful comb here. He also produced nature studies, particularly illustrated books of insects. But just amazing to look at that detail on there and see all the different, and now we know how they had to carve and all this different process. It's really quite amazing. So Hokusai was a very well-known ukiyo-e painter and printmaker of the Edo period, again, now Tokyo. He started as a young child and continued working and improving his style until his death at age 88. In a long and successful career, he produced over 30,000 paintings, sketches, woodblock prints, and images in picture books in total. Innovative in his composition and exceptional in his drawing technique, Hokusai is considered one of the greatest masters in the history of art. So just an amazing artist, and he's the one we're going to take a look at in a couple of weeks. So we'll really be able to dive in and see some of his work. He was also very well known for the 36 views of Mount Fuji. And again, this was like a serial view, so a series of them, so you could pick them all up. This was also a big response to the big travel boom, and also part of a personal obsession that he had with Mount Fuji. It was this series, specifically the Great Wave print, which we'll see in a minute, and this one, Fine Wind, Clear Morning, that really secured Hokusai's fame in both Japan and overseas. His work prior to this series was important, but it was with this series that he really gained international attention. So the Great Wave off of Kanagawa is the first print in Hokusai's 36 views of Mount Fuji. You're probably all very familiar with this. This image depicts an enormous wave threatening 3 boats in the coast off of Sagami Bay, while Mount Fuji rises in the background. Sometimes this was thought to be a tsunami, but the wave is more than likely just to be a large or a rogue wave. And we will learn more about Hokusai in our next lecture. So after Hokusai, really the next big ukiyo artist was Hiroshige. And he created, among other things, the 53 stations of the Tokaido. And again, this is a series of ukiyo-e woodcut prints. And it was after his first travel along the Tokaido in 1832. So the Tokaido Road linked the shogun's capital, Edo, or Tokyo, to the imperial one, Kyoto. And this was the main travel and transport artery of old Japan. It is also the most important of the 5 roads. These are the 5 major roads of Japan that were created or developed during the Edo period to further strengthen the control of the central shogunate administration over the entire country. So we not only see different changes in society at this time, but great infrastructure and really great movement in Japan moving forward as an industrialized nation. And here is another one of his series of the 53 stations of the Tokaido, but you can just almost feel the wind blowing in there, seeing that. I also wanted to talk about the intersection of ukiyo art and Western art and where it really kind of had been fascinating me. So ukiyo-e is an art form that represents Japan, but it exerted a significant influence on Western art. It was exhibited at the World Exposition held in Paris, France in 1867. And so it was really brought to Europe in the late 19th century. And this became what was called Japonism. At that time in Japan, ukiyo-e was not even considered to be valuable art. And many ukiyo-e were exported, especially around the beginning of the 20th century. Now, this Japonism movement lasted from the mid-19th century to the beginning of the 20th century. And for almost a half a century there, it really exerted quite an influence on Western arts and crafts. Very much so in Impressionist work, which we'll see in a minute, And interestingly enough, how they first came over was they were printing ceramics and other gifts that had been allowed to be imported into Holland. And so that's how they came to be there. And we'll hear an interesting story how they kind of came in. One day, a European artist saw the work of hokusai, which had actually been used as wrapping paper for a parcel delivered from Japan. And he acquired this, he took this artwork and brought it to his friends, Monet, Manet, and Degas. And this artist who did this was Vincent van Gogh. Now, Van Gogh was known to have been a huge ukiyo-e enthusiast and was also a passionate ukiyo-e collector. 477 prints that were owned by Van Gogh and his brother Theo are currently housed at the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. And ukiyo-e really captured the hearts of the great impressionists in their early years, and they really became aware of a new way of painting because of ukiyo-e. So it was the way either the close-ups or a different view of the landscape. We would look at landscape straight on. This might be up above or from down below. You may not see the horizon line. So really fascinating. So artists including Manet, Degas, and Monet, followed by Van Gogh, began to collect these cheap color woodblock prints. For a while, Vincent and Theo dealt in the sale of these prints and again, amassed hundreds of them. In a letter to Theo, dated about the 5th of June, 1888, Vincent remarks, about staying in the South, even if it's more, and it's talking about the South of France here, about staying in the South, even if it's more expensive, look, we love Japanese painting. We've experienced its influence. All the Impressionists have that in common. So why not go to Japan? In other words, to what is the equivalent of Japan, the South? So I believe that the future of the new art still lies in the South after all. So he's really equating the South of France with Japan, which is probably as close as he could get to it. And a month later, he wrote again to Theo, all my work is based on, to some extent, on Japanese art. So quite a considerable influence there. Another artist, Camille Pissarro, also an impressionist, wrote to his son, Hiroshige is a wonderful, whoops, here it is. Hiroshige is a wonderful impressionist. Me, Monet, and Rodin are enthusiastic about them. Everyone collected them, artists, writers, politicians alike, including Vincent van Gogh, politicians like Georges Clemenceau, writers like Edmond de Goncourt or Emile Zola. Monet was said to have brought many of the woodblocks back from Holland. As he later related, he had found the first one at a village grocer's where they had been brought together with products from the islands and overseas territories. So randomly how that kind of came, though the exposition also brought this to Paris. So we know that Monet was greatly influenced by Japanese prints. He almost never left Europe, so had never traveled to Japan. But in his home in Giverny, he surrounded himself with Japanese woodblock prints, some which you can see there in his living room. He first collected Japanese prints in the 1860s, and this passion would last for over 3 decades. At the end of his life, he owned 231 Japanese engravings. Like many other artists, Monet considered Japanese culture as very artistic, shaped by the refined aesthetic tastes of its people. It's beautiful, isn't it? Many painters of the 19th century were influenced by Japanese prints and paintings. As far as Monet is concerned, the way Japanese art shaped his style and the way he saw the world around him can really be noticed in many of his canvases in as early as the 1870s, but really throughout his entire career. And we'll take a look at that run right here. So it's kind of interesting. So the print on the upper right there is hokusai of his chrysanthemums. Then the one below it on the lower right is Monet's chrysanthemums. So when we're talking about the difference there, you see how it's very close up. There's no background per se to see that. And then very interesting there to see it translate also to the water lilies. And so almost kind of this moving to abstraction that Monet did in his later years was really influenced by the Japanese ukiyo-e wood prints. And so just kind of just fascinating how much he enjoyed them. So in conclusion, um, uh, there we go. So we take a look at this one of the later ukiyo prints. So following the deaths of Hokusai and Hiroshige, who were really the masters of ukiyo-e, and the Meiji Restoration in 1868, ukiyo-e suffered a sharp decline in quality and quantity. The rapid westernization of the Meiji period that followed saw woodblock printing turn its services to journalism and face competition from photography. Practitioners of pure ukiyo-e became more rare, and taste turned away from a genre seen as kind of a remnant of an obsolescent era. Artists continued to produce occasional notable works, but by the 1890s, the tradition was really over. Um, so, and that, then it's really then is kind of then when it went over to Europe. And so it's kind of this whole art was kept alive in Western Europe as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this quick look at ukiyo-e art. Again, I encourage you to go and take more look. There's so many beautiful prints out there. So thank you very much for your attention, and arigato.